Hey, yes, I know I haven't added music yet to that intro. I haven't found anything that works. Everything I've added to it will have a content ID match. I don't know why. Anything from like the audio library from YouTube lately has been content ID'd. I don't know if I'm the only one having it. I don't think so. I've looked it up, and I guess there's just these people deciding to content ID anything they can. But anyways, that's my intro. But look, I got David Joe with us. Oh my goodness, I am so ecstatic. This is gonna be awesome. You guys do your thing, answers and reason, and huge fans. And you guys actually had watched this video, and did a video on it. I didn't watch that video, but I didn't watch it on purpose. Okay, so it wasn't like I was slighting you guys. It just I wanted to kind of go in fresh with this because I told Braxton I would look at it. Not that he cares, but I wanted to look at it from a fresh point of view, and so I didn't watch anybody's response to this video. I know that Goddess Engineer, Shannon Q, and a whole bunch of other people had done responses, but I wanted to like do my own thing because I'm not an atheist. So this question isn't for me; it's for atheists. But as a non-believer agnostic, I figured I'd at least kind of give it a shot. Does that make that cool?
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome.
I think there are some questions that will be kind of for you, even though you're agnostic, but they're mostly aimed at atheists.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a ubiquitous types of questions. But so real quick, for people who may not know, Braxton Hunter is a theologian. I don't know what his standing is. Does he have a doctorate in theology or something? Am I mistaken?
I think so.
I think so.
He runs a seminary at Trinity College.
Yeah, something along those lines.
And he calls himself an evangelical apologist. So.
Okay, well, I mean, he does apologetics. I happen to get along with the guy. I think that, although I don't agree with him, he's at least civil and he likes to have honest discourse. That's all I can ask, right? Good guy. Yeah, that's all I can ask for. I mean, if he's honest and he wants to have dialogue and he wants to have answers to questions, and then, of course, he responds, that's great, because if he's going to ask these types of questions and people respond, I do notice he actually responds to those people. And I think that is really the best way to do these types of interactions. That's what YouTube is really predicated upon, because the old days, remember, people would make a video, but it would be a kind of a hate video, and then people would make a response video, and then make a response video, and it was just never went anywhere. I think these are much more productive this way. Right? And by the way, he watched your guys', didn't he?
Yeah. We went down reasonably well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's been doing responses back. So he's been doing one video per question and putting a few in there. And we were in the first couple. I don't think he's done us on the third. But I mean, yeah, Braxton, as you say, is a really good guy. And it's not the same old sort of fundamentalist stuff that you hear from the average internet theist as well. So I actually like the way he presents himself, the way he conducts himself, and what he says. I may not agree with him in a number of different ways, but I prefer to have a conversation with someone like him than someone who's going to be overly dogmatic and aggressive.
Oh yeah, there's some radical evangelicals that I won't even have conversations with. They've excluded themselves, they've extricated themselves from the conversation merely because they're so radicalized. And yeah, I don't see that with Braxton at all. All right, so there are 10 questions here. I don't know if we're gonna have time for all of them. We're gonna see this first question alone. I think all three of us can talk for quite a while on. But the outside, let me know if you guys can hear this. I've already tested it on the inside; they can hear it. But I'm gonna play the video, and we'll do one question at a time. And so as soon as the question, you guys start hearing it, let me know, because if not, it kind of sucks. All right, here we go. Let's see what Braxton asked the first question.
What facts about reality that you and I agree are real facts about the way the world is does your worldview account for, but my Christianity doesn't account for, or at least doesn't account for well? And for those of you that would point out atheism isn't a worldview, I'm talking about your worldview that includes atheism. I can't think of any. Christianity accounts for evil, suffering, the existence of other religions, including supernatural events in those other religions, science, and differences among different denominations of Christianity. But I can think of many things that the most common worldviews that include atheism don't answer as well as I think Christianity does. Like universal supernatural claims, universal religious experiences, free will, morality, near-death experiences, beauty, the rapid expansion of the early church, the events surrounding the life and death of Jesus of Nazareth, and our shared longing for purpose and meaning. So what is it that Christianity doesn't answer as well as your worldview?
All right. Well, the first thing I noticed when I listened to this question, first of all, what's a real fact as opposed to a non-real fact? Facts are facts. Facts by definition must be true. That's a requirement for what a fact is. It's true. Now, what constitutes a fact? That's complicated. There's theories out there that say, okay, this is what you would have to have in order to have a fact, a truth maker of some kind in certain theories. But a lot of people just say whatever corresponds with reality. And that's a simple atheist slogan that they put out there, which works. I have no problem with that. It's correspondence theory. But the question that he asked is a lot more nuanced than I think most atheists probably will recognize. Because when you're asking for an account, when you're asking for, let's say, a worldview account, and atheism as a worldview, fine. I don't have a problem with the people calling it an atheistic worldview or an atheist worldview, even though it's a propositional question on one single thing, God's existence. But it's still an outlook. Now, I think myself, when I say the word worldview, I think it's an overall theory of everything. But if you want to isolate it and say Christian worldview, atheist worldview, I don't have an issue with that. But what I do have an issue with is the way Braxton's phrasing this, what he means by an accounting. And when we ask for an accounting of something in philosophy, that means a metaphysical explanation, a metaphysical theory of sorts. So if I said, hey, let's say like Dave threw a ball to Joe, and I ask, what's the we'll go to the Aristotle causes, like the efficient cause. What's the efficient cause of how the ball got from Dave to Joe? Well, Dave threw the ball. He was the agent. Okay, that explains it, but that's not a theory, right? The theory that explains the ball going from Dave to Joe is the theory of kinematics or gravity, right? I mean, physics. These are the things that are the accounting of why the ball moved from one place to another. That's the explanation that they're looking for, right? That's the physics. So in asking these types of questions, what are we asking for accounting? We're asking for a metaphysical explanation. Well, the atheist has many theories out there that they can appeal to. Theory of knowledge, right? You can have the justified true belief. You can have reliabilism. A theory of truth. Okay, well, you want to go to deflationary theory, correspondence theory, coherence theory. There are all kinds of theories out there that atheists can use in order to, as he put it, account for something, right? And some of that can be very complicated when you start getting into even just the proper names. There's theories of describing things by proper name. Kripke's theories on what's called rigid designators. How do you account for certain things propositionally? Well, you can go to Russell and look at his theories on propositional things. These are what the questions that when Braxton's asking this is how I think atheists should answer these questions. How do they account for it? Well, let me give you the theory that accounts for it. Does that make? And I don't know again if a lot of atheists answer it that way, because I mean they're asking for metaphysical theories, in my opinion. That's what I hear when I hear that question, at least. What do you guys? Is that how you guys answered it?
No.
Am I way off base?
I think he was just looking for more sort of, can you give an efficient cause? Well, God can explain this. God's nature can explain that.
But does it? Let's say God is the efficient cause. Same thing, you threw the ball to Joe. Okay, you're an agent that threw the ball to Joe. Does that explain anything? Is that a theory? Is that predictability? Does it have explanatory power? No.
But I think that's sort of what he was looking for.
But that's the problem, I think. He's asking for an efficient cause, right? He's asking, how did the ball get from Dave to Joe? Well, Dave threw it. But that's not what the question's asking for in philosophy or physics. We're not asking in physics how the ball gets from Dave to Joe. We're asking, how do you model the parabolic curve, right?
How does it actually work through reality? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, as you say, there's no one atheistic worldview in that. And, atheism is part of a worldview, but whether they go through some form of materialistic explanation or whatever, which is why the Christianity can fill a lot of gaps in knowledge. So technically, it explains it better from the way he's presenting that argument, because there's things that we don't know. There's things that we're not certain about.
But I don't think it explains it, though. How does God explain it? It would only explain it to this way. If the explanation was God did it, and how he did it was this. And there's a way we can describe those rules that he used in order to do something, right?
Yeah, but then I suppose if you're going through the all-powerful theory of God, God can just snap his fingers, and is that enough of an explanation?
No.
I mean,
To me, no.
to me, it's not. But yeah, but to me, it's not either. But then we're not theists, so
Right, and I think that he's really willing to rest on his laurels and say, well, God done did it type thing. And again, I know that's a very canned response, but in this case, it's very applicable. God done did it is not an explanation, no more than Dave throwing the ball to Joe is an explanation. If Braxton had said, look, God did it, and how he did it was because he has to abide by certain metaphysical rules, and these are the rules of the supernatural. Right? Because we have rules of the natural, right? Physics are the rules of the natural, although we're describing them. We have descriptive formulas for them. We're not prescribing them like God could basically do. But it still has to have some kind of formality that God uses in order to have predictability, to have uniformity of nature, and to have a theory, a metaphysical theory, and accounting. I don't think ascribing an agent saying God did it is an accounting for anything, myself.
No, I don't, which is why I sort of took the route that I did. Because, like I say, I thought he was more looking for an efficient cause. So when he says we can account for evil, the Christian worldview can account for evil, well, we account for that by free will. Mm-hmm. That would be the answer that would be given. Mm-hmm. And that's why I mostly went, well, you know what? Yes, you can account for all these things, but I just don't believe Christianity or God.
And I would be out of the gate saying it doesn't account, but that's where we probably differ. Is I just don't think it's any kind of an actual counting of evil.
Oh no! But at least if by doing it that way, I could just go, yes, you do that. Now let's have a discussion about God's existence, which I think more is where this conversation should lie.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Oppie points it out too, not Graham Oppie, but Oppie. I wish Graham Oppie would watch. Huge fan. Oppie 499, he super chat. He says it's like asking for your ontology, epistemology, ethics, and aesthetics, and that's exactly right. Bingo. Braxton, all in one boom questions. He wants to know. Okay, what is your approach for epistemology? What is your approach for aesthetics? What is your approach for, do you describe to virtue ethics? Are you a utilitarianist? Are you a consequentialist? These are individual types of theories, metaphysical theories that account for things like epistemology. How do we know something? What constitutes knowledge, right? If you have things that is constitutive of knowledge and says, okay, do I meet the criteria for knowledge under justified true belief? Then you can say you know something. That is an accounting. That's how I would use that term, accounting. Not just in some kind of efficient cause as an agent, right? An efficient cause to me doesn't have to necessarily be an agent. It just means something has an antecedent. Something has a precursor to something, right? So what was the cause of event? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully the live chat, hopefully they didn't lose them on that one, but that's how I would answer that question. Okay. We kind of move on. Anything else you want to add there?
Oh, no. Is there anything else you want to add? I think the question's kind of malformed, which is why I went the route that I went.
Yeah, and I think the same thing. I think he's honestly asking it, right? I don't think he thinks it's malformed. I think it's just a question of the best way to answer it is an atheist can account for these things because they have theories to account for them, right? Mm-hmm. That's it. They have theories to account for them, like theories of knowledge, theories of justification. These are all accounting for things. Okay. But that real facts still kind of got to me. It's like,
there can't be anything that's not real if it's a fact.
Right.
No, but I suppose there are people that might perceive something as a fact. So that's what he's trying to draw the line there. There are people that sometimes think something's a fact when it's not. So,
right. They're just mistaken.
Again, I think we should just be a little bit charitable with the way it's worded, because people are generally not very clear with their language. Ever.
Oh yeah, I'm just giving a little ribbing. I'm very charitable. Although he's a theologian and he's a professional theologian apologist, so maybe a little more needling him than
dig in there.
Yeah, great. All right, next one here.
If your definition of atheism is merely that it's a lack of belief in God and you're just waiting to be convinced, but then you speak of him as though he's in some way synonymous with Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, or fairies. Doesn't that at least send the message to your listeners that you actually believe that there is no God? After all, these are entities and beings that you likely believe do not exist. And if your response is that you merely lack a belief in Santa Claus and don't actively believe that he does not exist, doesn't that sound a little disingenuous, honestly?
Okay, we love this question. I already know Joe does. We love this question. There's two major things on this. One, there is something to be had about designating a discussion specifically towards God as opposed to like leprechauns and fairies and things like that nature. And I think there's a reason for that. I mean, most people don't go to wars because of leprechauns. Most people aren't willing to have their lives taken in the name of a leprechaun. Religion has been around for thousands of years. There's been supposed experiences for people for thousands of years, and so I think it's a different domain of discourse. This is my own personal opinion, but I don't think that there's any people sitting around having thousands of years of discourse whether Santa Claus exists. So I think that's a slight category error in that regard that a lot of atheists will make, because if you want to ascribe God in that category of mythological beings, you have a lot of work to do. You have a lot of work to do. But I love the fact that he is right on this. A lot of atheists, as we've talked about multiple times, do retreat to merely lacking a belief, even though that they full on believe there are no gods, right? And it's a very disingenuous approach because they think they're trying to avoid the burden of proof, which is silly, because if you're trying to convince somebody, you want a burden of proof. You want to own that. You want to be able to persuade somebody. Why would you avoid your burden of proof? It seems counterproductive to me. But the biggest thing is that when an atheist will tell me things like, "Oh, well, I just merely lack a belief in Santa Claus," like he pointed out. It's like, wait a minute, you just don't believe Santa Claus, but do you believe that Santa Claus doesn't exist? Oh, I don't know, I'm agnostic on that proposition. What? I was like, how old are you? And same thing with me. I wrote on my blog the problem with not believing, because I've had atheists, and more than one. I'm talking dozens and dozens and dozens. That's why I wrote a blog on it, that have told me when I asked them, well, do you believe that I exist? And they're like, well, yeah. They don't believe that I exist because they don't want to say they have beliefs, right? Because they think the word belief is dirty. So they're like, I don't have beliefs because beliefs are based upon faith. I'm like, so you don't believe that I exist? No, I know that you exist.
Yeah, you go to Moore's paradox for that one.
Yeah.
A little peculiar reason.
You know you're human, but you don't believe you're human? What?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you guys can unwrap that a little bit. Yeah, why do people do that? I mean, first of all, belief is not a dirty word, and knowledge is a subset of belief in any belief first condition theory, which goes back to, again, accounting for knowledge. But why do you think atheist activists have for so many years have actively tried to get atheists to say, oh, well, I'm not saying there are no gods. I'm not saying that because I don't have a burden of proof on it. Why do you think they did? I don't think that helps their case at all.
I don't know. I think it comes down to the burden of proof thing. They have this thing where they want to keep the theist on the back foot, and they sort of want the theist to take up the burden of proof and say, well, it's all on you. You need to prove gods. You haven't proved gods. They want to keep that conversation there. But unless you argue against them,
it doesn't go anywhere.
They have the burden of proof. It does nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't go anywhere.
It's a lack of understanding of the burden of proof in the first place, though. I mean, it sounds scary. I mean, the word burden, it's quite a heavy word. And proof, they think that means you have to prove it true rather than justify the position as rational. And they don't seem to accept that all belief positions, even lacking belief, actually carry that burden of justification. Realistically speaking, any position that you hold should be justified as rational if you claim to be a rational person. Now, if you want to be someone who's completely irrational and just go, oh, well, I just lack belief and I don't have to do anything. Okay, that's fine, but you're not holding a rational position there. Why do you lack belief? Just tell me that. Give me some decent reasons. And you know what? You'll find so many of them do. Well, there's a number of holes in the various holy texts, and there's this and there's that. And they'll say all these things, but they won't say it under the category of burden of proof. They can fully justify their position, and they don't realize that that is them going through epistemic justification.
You're exactly right. Yeah, because they've been indoctrinated, and I'm using that word very specifically here, indoctrinated not to. But you're so exactly right, because when a lot of people see like Odin's probandi, and they'll look at that and go, oh, look, this means to prove something, and it doesn't mean that in philosophy. And here's when I was reading about philosophy years ago, I when I started like actually realizing that there was something to it, because again, 7 or 8 years ago, I was philosophically naive as complete could be, but I recognized that these words have usages, and these words are very, very specific. And when you don't have somebody who's a philosophical mindset trying to read something like the burden of proof and say, oh, this is means you have to prove something. It's like a creationist saying the Big Bang was a bang, right? They're misunderstanding what the epistemic justification is. And it isn't that you have to prove anything. If you have a burden of proof, it doesn't mean you have to prove anything. This is not a court case, which is, again, an equivocation of the term proof. Because when you prove something in a court case, you don't prove it like a logical proof. It's a preponderance of the evidence, or a sufficiency of conditions, whatever it is, for the judge or the jury to believe you. But that's not what a proof is with mathematics, clearly, right? And that's not what proof is for burden of proof, for an epistemic justification. And Joe was exactly right. If you don't believe something, why don't you believe it? If somebody says, hey, well, I don't believe that you exist, Steve, is that a rational position to have? I mean, it's a fair question to ask somebody, well, how is that rational to think that you don't believe that I exist? What's your reasoning for that, right? So if you merely lack a belief, you still have a burden of proof. You still have an epistemic justification of why you lack a belief. It's not just on the theist. And I'm sorry, Matt Dillahunty, you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong on this, and you've been told you're wrong on this for so many people that in philosophy. But him and Aaron Ra will never concede or capitulate that point, even though they've been told so many times that they're just wrong on that. I think Richard Carrier even told them that. I mean, I know in his blog he does agree that atheists have a burden of proof, but God.
Yeah, no, I try to explain to people that even general doubt needs justifications in order to be considered rational.
Yep.
Just saying I don't believe you is irrational if you don't have reasons to say I don't believe you.
Why is that so complicated for some people, though?
I don't know, but I think a big part of it is tied to the identity thing. They've got it drummed into them that being an atheist makes them rational and logical, and therefore any position they hold is naturally rational and logical, and therefore their lack of belief is instantly rational and logical.
That's true.
Godless engineer falsifies that premise. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't watch his one for this one, but I've seen some other responses.
Oh, it's terrible, honestly.
So bad.
I'm also wondering if maybe they're worried about losing a debate to a theist.
So
and
what?
That might be why
you lose a debate to a theist. It doesn't mean God exists.
But if you have this identity tied up that you're super rational and all theists are irrational and you can't beat them in a debate, then you'll start considering yourself irrational, because if you can't beat them, I'm just wondering if there's an identity problem there.
Possibly. Well, yeah, well, especially when you have people like Aaron and Dillahunty who are, actively, I would put them as atheist activists. They don't want to look bad in still people's eyes. I don't care if I lose a debate. I'll be like, hey, I'll just study harder next time. Now, I have never lost a debate. I mean, at least in my eyes, I've never lost a debate. But I guess there's some subjectivity there. But put aside the subjectivity, although people have changed their position, I guess that's kind of a win if they change their position and they say, yeah, you're right, and I now believe what you're saying. That to me is a win, right? But yeah, I think a lot of it is the fact that they have an image to maintain. I don't give a crap about that. If I get something wrong, that's fine. If I lose a debate. And so I'm willing to put myself out there a lot more, but they just won't.
No, they definitely won't.
No,
it's why I don't really get into a discussion with many atheists anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, they do also often say that gods are imaginary as well. And what is something that is imaginary? It's something with no objective reality. It's something that does not exist. Intrigue Feline brings up an interesting point as well. A lot of mythological characters are rooted in historic people, so whether it's Santa Claus being rooted in someone real, or even Jesus, the contemporary analysis of it is that someone that was this rabbi or apocalyptic preacher, etc., probably did exist, and a lot of these stories were based on him, and it's a bit of an amalgamation. But then you get the whole Jesus mythicism as well. So they've got these people who it's considered quite a fringe theory. So they say Jesus, is a myth. He never really existed. There's no proof. All the Bible's full of lies, etc., etc. Oh yeah, but I only lack a belief. I mean, if you really believe the Bible is full of lies,
I'm glad you pointed that out, because Braxton had something he called the Hunter's Dilemma, which is just too basic. It's just two premises and the facts that they're logically inconsistent with each other. So if you subscribe to one, you can't subscribe to the other. And so I've seen a lot of atheists do that. That was like, gods are imaginary, but I merely lack a belief. Now, it is true they lack a belief, but when they throw that word merely in, or just, that is disingenuous. Because that's not the case.
Oh, yeah.
If you say gods don't exist, if they're all imaginary, they're all myth, you merely don't lack a belief. You lack a belief because you believe gods don't exist. And that would be a rational entailment, right? Because if you say gods don't exist, in order to maintain that rational entailment, because if I say gods don't exist, but, Yahweh does, there's a contradiction there, right? But you can't just merely lack a belief. You can't say there are no gods, but I'm agnostic on the proposition, because that's basically what it would be.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, next question. I've been so looking forward to this too, by the way. This is great.
When
You guys are
atheism
awesome.
becomes a part of someone's worldview, they typically change their positions on other issues like abortion, sexual morality, and a number of other things. I actually have several videos of well-known atheists saying that there's nothing wrong with prostitution, that they hope their children don't save themselves until marriage, and that sex workers should be put up on a pedestal no different than the military. I didn't use those here because I didn't want to seem combative to individuals, specifically the individuals who made those statements. But even if you didn't become an atheist just so you could sin, and I believe you, do you at least understand why those moves could send that message to people who might say that to you?
All right. First of all, I don't have a problem with prostitution. He has to make an argument why prostitution is bad. I mean, even Jesus associated with prostitutes. So you can't just say by fiat prostitution is bad. Give me some arguments for that, right? But I've never in my life heard a parent ever say, well, I hope my kid doesn't save themselves from marriage. It depends. I've never heard anybody say that. Some people say, look, if you want to get married and you want to have some, know what you're doing, you don't want to go into marriage, maybe not having any sexual experience. That's a fine argument. I think there's a reasons for that. But he's not making an argument for anything. He's just throwing these things out there like, oh, parents are saying to their kids, hey, don't save yourself for the marriage. Maybe they want to because they want to be compatible with only one person and have that kind of bond. Who knows? But that has nothing to do with atheism. And neither does prostitution. You people don't say, hey, look, I don't want to believe there's a God because I want to have prostitution, or I don't want to believe in God because I want to have sex. Nobody says that. Guess what? Christians have sex. A lot of it. Okay? They're not some high moral standard. Look at the people, look at the evangelists out there. They've all been busted for sexual, impropriety and stuff like that. So that is a non-starter with me to say, well, I just want to be an atheist or a non-believer because I want to sin. Nobody does that. Nobody.
Well, when he threw in the abortion thing as well, it's like nobody actually wants to go out and get an abortion. They're put in circumstances where they have to.
Right.
Yeah, and there's arguably verses in the Bible that actually seem to suggest that God is okay with abortion if the wife has been unfaithful, for example. I mean, I don't want to necessarily go down that route.
Well, that's true. The
this
temple floor
conversation.
test, right? The temple floor scrape. They drink it. I mean, and abortion is a hell of a topic. I mean, that again, people have lived and died because of that particular topic. People have, killed and been killed because of that's how volatile that particular proposition is should there be abortion? And so I don't see how that is even a relevant question to atheists or Christians, because both of them have to deal with that. Christians have abortions too. And as you pointed out, we don't know what God's view on it is. It seems to be questionable.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and I don't think anybody necessarily wants to go out and sin. They might not believe certain things are sins, but I think most people think about things and they do things, and sometimes people screw up. I mean, we all make mistakes and we go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But that sort of stuff aside, I think most people are out there trying to do the best that they can with the people around them. So I don't think anyone necessarily wants to sin. They just might not agree that certain things in the Bible are actually sins. And if you don't have this arbiter of sin, then realistically, there's, what actually is good and bad, and you have to go down that question of morality, the purpose of morality, what best represents morality. There's so many different moral theories and things that you can build up to with that. So realistically speaking, I don't think that's a particularly great question.
Yeah, no, you're right on it. By the way, it goes back to the first question for atheists having a moral theory, right? How do you account for morality? Well, Dave, I would say he's an expert on virtue epistemology. That's the theory that people can use to account for morality. But, divine command theory, all you're doing is abdicating your own personal moral responsibility to some deity that you think that you're getting right. You're hoping that you are getting right. But at the same token, everybody, according to Christianity, sins. Christ was the only person who supposedly never sinned in his life. So everybody does. So the only difference is they get to go, hey, I sinned, forgive me, and then go do it again.
And we have to make amends to the people we hurt.
But do you agree? I mean, like, look at the Catholic Church. Oh, okay, well, I say, oh, Rose, Holy Mary, full of grace, whatever. Go to the priest, get confessional, boom, and then you go out and sin some more. Again, it's the intentionality of sinning is something that atheists and Christians would be, but that has nothing to do with sin against God. It has to do with unethical behavior, right?
Exactly.
Yep. And I think that's where I think the disconnect is, because they're saying when you do something unethical, you're sinning against God. And when we look at it as a non-believer, we say, look, you're doing something unethical because you're doing something against whatever virtue ethics or utilitarianism or consequentialism or some moral theory that says this is the wrong course of action. Don't do it, because we've had reasons over countless years of social evolution to say this is a bad thing. This is unethical behavior. Don't rob a liquor store because you're stealing from somebody else. You're causing harm. I don't need a deity for that. Good. Sorry, I'm in one of my rant moods.
At the chat. Chris says if he wanted to sin, he'd join the church.
Yeah, I was kind of going there. I was like, look, wouldn't it be great if you wanted to sin, you just join the church, you sin all you want, you get forgiven, you go out and do it more. But again, that intentionality there, because when you say I'm going to go do something that's unethical, right? Is God still going to forgive you on it? I mean, is that the point?
One unforgivable sin.
Blasphemy against the Holy Ghost. Yeah, blasphemy against the Holy Ghost. Yeah. Which is not really explained very well. The way most Christians I've talked to explain it as blasphemy against the Holy Ghost is having perfected knowledge and then still denying God. Like Satan would have perfected knowledge and he's denied God, so that would be unforgivable. Or be blasphemy. That's blasphemy against the Holy Ghost.
Yeah, no human could commit that then.
Right. And I've had actually Christians tell me that. They're like, oh, nobody could actually commit that. It'd just be the demons and the host of heavens that went down with Satan. But no, again, this question seems odd to me because, again, I don't know how many atheists have ever said, I just want to be an atheist or I just want to be an agnostic because I want to sin. As a theist or when I was a theist, there's nothing I was doing any different than now. Really.
I mean, it's generally the theists that say, well, if I didn't believe in God, then I'd go out there and be raping and murdering and doing all that.
That's a sociopath.
I hope you maintain that belief then, because, you believe in God if it stops you doing all those things. And there is that common quip that some atheists do throw out that go, I do rape and murder all that I want, which is absolutely zero because I have a moral compass, etc.
Yeah, I don't need a God to tell me those are bad things. But you're exactly right. I knew one person one person that I recall over the last how many years I've been on YouTube that actually has said exactly what you said. If it wasn't for the Bible, there was Jehovah's Witness, and they said if it wasn't for the church and the Bible, they would be out doing whatever the hell they want. If they wanted to kill somebody, if they wanted to rape somebody, if they wanted to steal. And I'm like, yeah, you keep believing. Just you keep believing because you are a sociopath. You're a psychopath, straight up. And so it does happen, but it's not very common. But you're right. On those people, would you... For the atheist activists out there, would you want somebody like that to not believe? No, you want them to believe all they want. All right, moving on to the next one. Oh, this is fun, guys. This is fun. Hope the live audience is getting something out of this.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad we finally got a chance to come on. I've been wanting to for a long time. Just so busy with the degree and stuff, didn't get a chance.
Yeah, and by the way, huge props, congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
We're gonna be doing some Ask a Philosopher stuff because I've been doing Ask a Non-Philosopher. I'll have you on to Ask an actual philosopher because you guys.
I wouldn't go that far just yet.
Shh, you are a philosopher. Deal with it. Suck it up, man.
Yeah,
Right.
you're a distinct master of philosophy.
Yes. and Joe and I are philosophical in nature. We're not philosophers, but we're philosophic, I guess. I don't know. We'll think of a word for it.
Enthusiast.
Enthusiast.
Enthusiasts.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, next one. Are we up to 4?
If it's a lack of belief sort of atheism, what is it? Is it 50-50, 60-40, 75-25? And at what point do you feel disingenuous saying that you merely lack a belief as opposed to leaning towards, I believe that God does not exist?
You know, that's actually a good question. And let me tell you why that's a good question. Because on the like a Dawkins scale, he has like a qualitative way of looking at it, right? So there's a numerical value. This I just be quantitative. There's a numerical value that could be assigned to it. And for an agnostic myself, there's an area, there's a gray area kind of thing where it's like maybe between 40 and 60, 35 and 75, belief one way or another. So there's a middle ground to be had there. And there's no line of demarcation, but is it like anything else? When you have a belief of something, where's the line of demarcation to say, I'm convinced? It's the same question, right? If you ask somebody, are you convinced this is the case? Which is asking if they believe it. Either you do or you don't. It's a binary proposition. But what's the line of demarcation that caused somebody to be convinced, to say, look, I am convinced on this? So it's a fair question to say, okay, where on that spectrum do you lie? The only thing that's a little disingenuous about it is the fact that there is no line of demarcation. And maybe atheists and agnostics don't have any set hard line, because I sure don't. It's whenever it is my brain tells me I'm convinced of something. But I could probably guesstimate that it's probably between 30 and 70%, give or take. It might be more strict. But if somebody says, yeah, I'm 99.999999999% convinced, but I'm almost there, but I still lack a belief. But it's probably 99.9999. But I lack a belief on it because I'm not convinced yet. Yeah, you're 99.99. You're convinced, right? So yeah. I mean, so what do you guys think about this question? I mean, it's not like I said, it's not a bad question. It's just there's no line of demarcation on these types of evaluations when you start using the quantitative analysis of a belief, a gradient kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously both Dave and I believe gods don't exist, so we're not in that lack of belief spectrum. But
I call you guys proper atheists. That's my term, proper atheists.
But as you say, it's when your brain tells you, isn't it? It's I have the thing where I'm unconvinced. I do lean a certain way, but I'm still not sure. And then I go, yeah, you know what? That does sound right. I think I believe that to be true. And there is no specific line. I can't put my finger on what it is. But I have. I'm not sure. I lean a certain way, but I'm still not sure. I am convinced. I am strongly convinced. I know. I have knowledge of this fact.
I think that's great. And again, I have a hard time with numbers, but having some kind of system like that, where you just say, look, like me, I lean a certain way. Okay, but I'm not convinced yet. Or you know what? I'm convinced, but not strongly. Or hey, you know what? I really believe this. Or I have knowledge, right? Or I have certainty would be the highest, right? Or epistemic certainty, if you really want to, like, I have epistemic certainty, a metaphysical sense that, like, I exist, which is the only thing I could probably say I have any kind of epistemic certainty of. But yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. But see, this applies to the the Christian as well when it goes to well, what degree of belief that you have for God. You know, so
Yeah.
but I understand his point. His point is why are atheists that are saying, hey, look, yeah, I'm convinced there are no gods, but I merely lack a belief. He's saying that is just a disingenuous statement. And so when people say, well, yeah, I think there's 99.99% chance there are no gods, but, I just lack a belief. Yeah, he's right. That is disingenuous for atheists.
It is. I mean, you hear people using the Dawkins scale in a similar way. They go, for the Abrahamic deity, I'm definitely a 7, but for other gods, I'm 6.9999. Therefore, I only lack a belief. And you're like,
yeah, that's
really?
That's so bad.
You're that certain, but you only lack what?
Yeah, I've seen people do something like that. Now, Icarus points this out too. When somebody says, "I don't believe it, I know it," that's cringe. That's like an Aaron Ra type statement. I
wish people would stop saying that.
Bad. That's a bad.
It's like when
argument.
people say, "I don't believe evolution. I accept evolution as true." And like, do you realize what you've just said? Well, no, clearly they don't.
They don't.
But when you explain it to them, they get really angry and they go, "No, believe only means like something that faith without evidence." And you're just like, no, it's literally just something
and you
accept
asked.
as
I've been
true.
blocked over this, Joe. Atheists have blocked me over this very conversation when I'm in evolution groups and I love the topic, and so an atheist will say that I don't believe in evolution. I accept that as a confirmed theory. Then I say, well, wait a minute. So you're saying you don't believe? Well, so you don't believe in evolution? Well, I'm saying I don't believe in it because it's a confirmed theory. Well, yeah, but you're saying you don't believe in evolution. That's what they're saying. It's your words, right? But they're not understanding. Well, it's because belief is based upon faith. No, it's not. If you don't believe in something, you're not accepting it to be the case because it's propositional. So the proposition is something like evolution describes biodiversity, right? If that's the proposition, that proposition is true or false. If you think that proposition is true, then you accept evolutionary theory. If you don't think it's true, you either are agnostic on the proposition or you think that evolution's false, right? So it's one of the two in that case. If somebody says, well, I don't believe evolution, I know it, or something like that. They're actually telling well, that's a contradiction right there. But if they say, I don't believe evolution, but I accept it, they're telling you they're either agnostic on the proposition or they believe it's false, to be rational, because they're talking about a proposition of evolution describing biodiversity. And you try to explain it to them that way, and they lose their minds.
Yeah, we've got a person in some group on Facebook who always sad faces our posts now after having that very discussion with him. Just every post we make, he doesn't even bother to read it, he just sad faces it.
Isn't it?
And we were called religious fundamentalists by saying that.
It's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have I been called like a theist troll for either trying to explain what a belief is or epistemic justification, or how the different forms of atheism that are out there, and how the modern lack of belief is quite a new definition. It's valid, but it's not the most sound. And all of a sudden, yeah, you're a theist troll because they're tribal. And there's this that you're not saying exactly what Aaron Ra told me is true.
Exactly.
Therefore, you must be a theist.
That's it. I've been accused of the same thing. I've been kicked out of groups because I've been literally explaining to them epistemology, and I think pretty correctly, and yet all kicked out for telling the people, this is how it actually is, and they'll be like, no, you're just a theist troll kind of thing. It's like, no.
Atheists need to do better.
You know what they'll do, Dave?
If atheism is just a lack of belief in gods, and that means theism can be a lack of belief in gods, not existence. Therefore you are a theist.
That's my WASP argument, which is, by the way, my WASP argument is still unassailed. Anybody who says that they've assailed it, they're full of crap. Not even all these people. Look, if you think my thing is simple. If people think that they've assailed my WASP argument, my weak atheist special pleading argument, take it to a real philosopher like Dave or something like that. Have them evaluate it and have them come to me, because the people have, like, one or two people that have said they've assailed it, and I've looked at their it's nonsense, complete nonsense. And so, sure, people can say, well, maybe you're looking at it wrong. Sure. Okay, but go to an actual professional, because I guarantee it, not one professional has said I'm wrong on this yet. So I don't think that's an assailed argument. You're right. If atheism could be a lack of belief, theism could be a lack of belief. That God does not exist. But yeah, I was going to wrap it up with the whole getting kicked out of these groups because they think you're some kind of a theist or something like that. And I'll even have this nice post, and somebody will say to me, "But you haven't proved you're God." You haven't proved that God exists. I'm like, what the hell does this have to do with my post? At that point, you know you're dealing with not a well-educated person, or at least somebody who's not familiar with these topics, and they're just parroting stuff out there. Because I'll write something really well, I think, and somebody was like, well, that doesn't prove God exists. You have demonstrate your God exists. What? First of all, that's not my point. But all right, next question.
Now, I know we've all got our talking points, but I want you to struggle to be as sincere with yourself as you can right now. Doesn't it bother you a little bit that when we come to talk about the origins of the universe, and if there's a multiverse, the origin of that too, that the only real options you've got besides God is a past infinite universe, which is impossible, or the universe coming to exist uncaused out of nothing, or something far less clear than even those? It seems that for any worldview that includes atheism, there's a massive blind spot when it comes to the origin of the universe. And all the attempts to try and circumvent that problem seem desperate and at least far less likely than theism. My question isn't just what do you typically say about this, because I'm well aware of the responses. My question is simply this: when you step away from the debate mode that it's so easy for us all to get into online, doesn't this issue destabilize you a little bit? It seems to fit really poorly with any worldview that includes atheism.
All right, Braxton, let me talk to you, my man. Why the hell do you think infinite regress is impossible? Matter of fact, one of the most foundational things in justifications for theories is the Munchausen trilemma. Some people call it the Agrippa trilemma, but the Munchausen trilemma, which is axiomatic assumption, infinite regress, and the axiom would be a brute fact, infinite regress, or metaphysical causation. You basically have just taken out one of the legs of the trilemma and saying, yeah, we can't have an infinite regress. Why not? There's absolutely nothing against having an infinite regress. Matter of fact, there's a whole theory on justification called infinitism based upon infinite regress. Okay, so I mean, you can't say that these things are impossible, or it was weird that he actually said that, because I heard that, I was like, does he recognize that is you're taking away one of the there's only three possible justifications for any theory, that you have to ground it in something of either, hey, this is a brute fact, right? Or this is as a metaphysical causation, or that has a infinite regress. And he just by fiat says, well, infinite regress, you can't have that. Why? And again, why ascribe an agent to it? Good.
Yeah, he also says that the universe having always existed in some sort of form, like whether it's just the energy in the universe existing, is impossible.
Why?
But one, why? Two, if that's impossible, then surely an infinite God is impossible. Or if an infinite God is possible, then surely an infinite universe is possible. We don't honestly know what happened, how everything came to be. I don't claim to know. I believe that the universe has always existed in some shape or form. I believe that the energy in the universe has always been there, but our current state happened with the Big Bang.
Yeah, well, and I don't think there's a problem with positing a God for this, and it doesn't run a problem with infinite regress, because when a theist posits a deity, they're positing it as a metaphysical necessity, okay, and that's what I meant by the Munchausen, not metaphysical causation, but metaphysical necessity. So you have infinite regress, brute fact, which is basically contingent things coming from other contingent things that we just accept as a brute fact, or you have a metaphysical necessity that must be true in all possible worlds. So if God exists, if the theist is positing, that particular deity would be a metaphysical necessity. It doesn't suffer from infinite regress, and it doesn't suffer from contingency issues, because it must exist in all possible worlds. So when somebody says, well, if what created God, that's only a bad argument if a theist does say, look, all things have a creator. Then when they say all, that's a problem. But if they say all contingent things have a God, have a creator, all contingent things are based upon something else, then they can posit a deity and there's not a problem there. It's only when they say all things that have a creator, then who created God? That's true. That's a logical argument. But I don't think a lot of theists actually posit that. What they posit is, hey, look, all the things that we want to have an explanation for, all the things that we say, what's the causation? The answer for them would be a deity. That's not that doesn't have any illogical issues with it, because they're saying all contingent things have an explanation, and that explanation is God. Because again, must exist. But one of these days we'll have a hang on metaphysical necessities, like and this goes back again to like Kripke's rigid designators. I don't know if you read anything about that, Joe, but it's fascinating that you have certain things that are metaphysical necessities, like water equals H2O would be a metaphysical necessity, or Hesperus equals phosphorus, both representing the morning and evening star Venus, as metaphysical necessities. And it's hard to wrap your head around that, going, why is that a metaphysical necessity that Hesperus must equal phosphorus? They could have had different names, but they argue that they're rigid designators such that it could be no other way. They have to exist in that relationship in all possible worlds. So, but anyways, off track. One of these days, we'll get into that. I love those types of things with intentionality things, and de re, de dicto, love that stuff. All right, let's go. I'm really high on coffee right now. Can you tell? That's just coffee. I really spooked it in there.
Of the arguments for God's existence, is there one that to you seems more interesting than the rest? Is there one that for you actually does weigh in favor of theism? Which one?
No. The only one that I find of interest, and I do like the argument from contingency, even though I don't think it actually gets you to a God, but at least is an argument to say, if you don't have a brute fact, if you don't accept that there's an infinite regress, then if there's a metaphysical necessity, what would it be? And theists have every right to posit a God for that metaphysical necessity. How they go about justifying that, that's a little bit different. And also, to me, positing a God as an explanation for the universe doesn't explain why he created this actualized universe, right? Of all the possible worlds he could have created, why is it he created this one? And without that explanation, we don't have an accounting of why this universe exists.
Exactly. For me, I chose to answer this one with the argument from design. There's something intuitional about it. It doesn't necessarily get me to God or make me lean towards theism, but there's something intuitional about that argument, and I think it's one of the better sort of arguments just for, oh, look, it looks designed. Let's talk about this.
And I don't think that that's bad, but I would give one step further. If people want to make an argument of the relationship to things like music, physics, mathematics, and there's the relationship to how there's a harmony between all these different things, to imply there's some kind of metaphysical causation to it. It's hard just to say just by fiat hand wave that away, because there is an aesthetic thing to be had there. The beauty of mathematics, the beauty of the Fibonacci sequence, the looking at these things and seeing the elegance that is in there. It does, to some people say, maybe a mind came up with this, because why do we have the ability to formulate these things? Why do we have the ability to count? I mean, math is going to me, math, music, and art gets you closer to God than anything else. And I know like Richard Dawkins hates the argument from aesthetics, and he discounts that right off the bat. But I kind of get pushback on that. I'm like, look, if somebody has a spirituality because they love music, and you could be spiritual and not believe in a God, but you feel the music and the empowerment and the relationship between the beats and the percussions and the woodwinds and the strings and all these things harmonizing together, and you go, how does the universe have something like this? I think we feel something like that. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use the word miraculous, that to me is appropriate there, although it doesn't mean something from God. It just means that it is almost preternatural that these things in all the universe, we have an earth where we have our minds, we have people that created this stuff, because that stuff may not have happened on other worlds. They may not have, they wouldn't have art like we would have. They may not have music like we have. It is very unique to humanity. And so that would be the only argument that I think.
Yeah. There are some arguments that can be made, even if they don't lean you towards God. There's some that aren't. You just can't hand wave it away. You've got to have reasonably good arguments to argue against them.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that what happens is a lot of atheist activists hand wave things away. But I don't think that was probably an answer Braxton was actually expecting. But I hope he reviews this. I really do. I like to get his opinion. He's like, Steve who?
Very well.
No, didn't he answer your
No,
Hunter's Dilemma one?
Yeah, no, we kid each other. We kid each other.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he definitely he knows this. He'll watch it, I'm sure. I don't know if he'll talk about it, but because he goes after atheists. I'm not an atheist, so I don't know if he'll actually do something about it. We'll see.
Though under the average understanding.
I would like to see how my answers differ from the answers that he's had from other people so far. Like I said, I didn't watch the videos, so are my answers anywhere close to what you guys did on your video, or
reasonably close for some of them? Yeah.
Yeah, your answers are definitely more well formed than a lot of the others that we saw.
Thanks.
I know, low bar.
Well, you've had
I'm gonna be nice. Like, there's so much I can say right now, but I'm gonna be nice. Because I like when your bar is like, all right. All right, here we go.
Most atheists I've met humbly admit that they don't think they can have absolute certainty about much of anything. But what they want from the Christian is a demonstration that God exists or that Christianity is true. But when we offer the reasons to believe that we do have, those are typically deemed not good enough. So what sort of evidence, if any, would be enough to convince you? Do you know? And since it's often a conversation stopper, let's take experimental reproducibility off the table, since that's not even always necessary for science.
All right, so the thing with this question is that when an atheist is asking for a demonstration, right, I don't have a problem with that if that is what's going to convince them. But when a theist like Braxton says, hey, look, I'm giving you the evidence that I have, it's not convincing you. Well, that's not my problem. It's not convincing me, right? It's not the issue. If God wants to convince me, He can convince me, right? But if you say, well, I'm gonna give you a demonstration God exists, and I say, okay, great, and all of a sudden you do something miraculous, you bring back the dead, or somebody who's like legit dead, I'd be like, oh, that's a demonstration. Yeah, I believe, right? I have no problem with that. I think most atheists, if they have sufficient reasons, obviously, and a demonstration like that, would be pretty convincing, right? Now, sure, there's some that'd be like, oh, there's got to be some other explanation. But if we're talking about somebody who's dead, like their skeleton, and you see like the muscles come back, and you go, okay, this is definitely either huge alien technology or a god, but this person's telling me they're doing it through God. Yeah, I'm probably going to believe them on that. I don't have a problem. But I don't see any I don't see any theists actually ever saying that. They don't say, look, I'm going to demonstrate to you God. They're going to say, I believe God exists. Here's my reasons for it. Here's the reasons how I justify it to myself. But the problem is there's no transportability of these justifications sometimes. What justified to them is not necessarily going to be justified to somebody else, because a lot of it's not finding it very convincing unless they were there at the time. If you guys were there 2,000 years ago and you saw Jesus, heal people, and you saw him crucified and come back 3 days later, and you saw all this happen, you would probably be convinced, right? Right. So there's nothing wrong with having a demonstration. Nothing wrong being convinced by seeing something, some kind of empirical evaluation, some kind of posteriori knowledge, right? Because we observe something. But that's not what the theist is saying to the atheist. And I think that's the problem with this question, is that the theist is saying, look, you're asking me for why God exists, why I believe God exists. I'm giving you the reasons. Okay, that just means, you're telling me why it's justified to you. The most I can do is say, yeah, I think you are probably justified to believe it based on what you told me. Okay, whatever. But it's not convincing to me. And they seem upset by that.
Yeah, I think it more goes to the point that most atheists just repeat. I want repeatable, testable evidence or future testable predictions.
But that's a
that kind of
scientific
thing.
test, right? As he pointed out, that's not, God is a metaphysical thing. God is a metaphysical claim, not a scientific claim. And that, so you have as Stephen Jay Gould pointed out, there's a non-overlapping magisterium between science and philosophy. And I think, even though they're integrally related, science is molded by philosophy. But when you say, when a atheist says, I need to do experiments with God, they're not understanding science or philosophy.
Agreed.
So
It's going into the realm of scientism, isn't it?
yeah,
Basically.
that hardcore is scientism, which is a real word. It is a real thing, people. A lot of people say, scientism is a word that Christians use or theists use. No, it's actually is a real phenomenon. It's a misuse of the scientific method by something along the lines of trying to test for non-repeatability or supernatural causations. Because again, if you're going to test for something like a supernatural causation, the most you can do is falsify it. If I look at the Shroud of Turin and I say, hey, look, this has been carbon dated, it goes back to the 12th or 13th century or whatever, it's like 13th century, give or take. Sure, it's been falsified. It's been shown it is definitely not of supernatural origin, but science can never confirm a supernatural origin. And so scientism would be trying to use science to confirm a supernatural causation. Say, well, science can test for God to prove that God exists. No, it can't. It has explicitly been taken out of that domain because the science wants to find a natural explanation for a natural phenomenon. And now you're saying, no, I'm going to use science to find a non-natural explanation. That's not what science does. You've now changed the entire thing. What science is the tool that it is for. Now, if you want to use philosophy to demonstrate God exists and philosophy to show that you're good to go. You're in the right domain. But see, these atheist activists, they don't want to do that. They're like you said, that word scientism. That's what they fall into a lot.
Very much so.
Wow, I'm winded. I'm enjoying this.
Ranting is good.
I know. I don't get to do these often. I need to do a lot more of these. They're very cathartic. Very. Seriously,
that's one of the reasons we do our podcast, just so that we can have a rant every now and again and get it all off our chest.
You definitely need it. Okay, what do we got next?
To what extent did social and moral issues start you down the path toward your atheism? That is to say, the typical Christian or religious views on sexuality, gender, rights, and acts and commands of God in the Old Testament. It seems that many deconversion stories online begin with, or at least include, LGBT issues, purity culture, or hell as instrumental in the deconversion process. It strikes me that what should matter most is the truth and not what we might prefer that the truth were. I honestly wonder how much those issues and ones like them motivate the deconversion rather than all this talk about evidence.
All right. Well, I mean, the one point that he makes on this is something that actually relates to me. I became a non-believer because of LGBTQ issues, because in California in 2008, I believe it was, they had Proposition 8, and churches, especially the LDS church, was trying to get the proposition such that they wouldn't have gay marriage. And I thought that was ridiculous. First of all, a church shouldn't be getting into political things like that. And second, I don't have a problem with gay marriage, obviously. And I don't think that God has a problem with homosexuality. I think that a lot of people that are in the Christian side, they have personal issues with homosexuality. And then they try to basically transfer that to some deity because they don't want to abdicate their own unethical beliefs about that, right? If they say, look, I don't care about gay or not, but God says, that you shouldn't have, gay sex. I think they're just taking their own personal moral views and projecting it on, and they're calling it, a deity and saying, well, no, God wants that. Because you ask them, well, wait a minute, if God said, gay marriage is fine, and God has told you there's no problem with homosexual relationships, they'll never answer that. They'll be like, oh, well, God will never do that. That's not the question. That, they'll just deflect. They'll never say they're going to accept homosexuality because they'll just defer that to God, and they will never change their mind on that because God must be correct on it. And that I think is a deconversion for a lot of people, because my ethics are based upon my ethics, virtue ethics. And ethically speaking, there ain't nothing wrong with gay marriage. Nothing.
Oh, no.
And so if a God says to me, well, Steve, you're wrong on that. I don't want gay marriage, and I don't think people should be gay. Then why do they exist in the first place? To me, it doesn't make any sense. And I would tell that God, I would disagree with you. Now, would I still worship him if he existed? Yeah, because hell is I'm not going to be condemned. But why does he have some moral the things he did in the Bible, I don't agree with. A lot of things that I don't agree with, because I have my own ethical center. And I think that's the problem, that he's trying to say, well, people just want to become atheists because of these gay issues and things like that. It's like, no, a lot of people just have ethics, and they say, look, I have a problem with some of the things the church is doing. Look at the Catholic Church, for Pete's sake. I mean, how widespread the pedophilic things from the priests were. It was all over the place. It was ubiquitous. I have a problem with that. And so I think that's an unfair question to pose to atheists, saying, well, you just want to be an atheist because of these issues. It's like, no, you want to be an atheist because you think that you have an ethical standard that particular person's God doesn't have, because Matt Powell believes that his God told him and other people that the government should run and kill gay people. I'm sorry, I got a huge issue with that. Right? I mean, to me, his God is unethical. His God is a piece of shit. Okay? I mean, what do you want?
Yeah, that's it. The conception of good that somebody has isn't matched by what people claim God to be.
Yeah, definitely. Though for me, I mean, it wasn't actually any sort of moral stance that started me down the path of atheism.
You just wanted to sin.
Yeah, of course.
Look at that face. It's a sinner's face.
Gorgeous. He's fabulous.
But no, it was darling. It was finding contradictions and things like that. Now, I always went to Christian schools, so I grew up saying the Lord's Prayer every day and all that sort of thing. And I started finding things in the Bible that just didn't seem to match up with things like science, or they seemed to contradict each other, or there was questionable nature. There was just stuff that didn't make sense. And I would ask the various religious leaders within the school, and they would give questions that would give answers that just raised more questions and more questions and more questions. And it got to the point where I was just like, man, this is just excuse upon excuse upon excuse. But I didn't straight away become an atheist. I went through a sort of period of agnosticism, then I jumped into different religions, and then I sort of deconverted again and went into that one, and I had all sorts of crazy beliefs. And eventually I just went, fucking hell, it's all a flight of fancy.
Well, there's two big things you said that I did take very specific note of. One, things in the Bible. There's a lot of things. I went to Bible things 2 a.m. There's a lot of things in the Bible I didn't even know until years ago. Matter of fact, I'm Milwaukee atheist. They have Bible study all the time, and I'm thinking, I'd never even heard this before. This is new. Like, for example, was it? I always forget his name. Zeb, the general that goes out and says, if I win the war, when I come back, the first thing I see, I'm going to kill, and it's his daughter, Zebda, or something like that. I've never heard that story before. I also never heard of the cannibalism. I think it's in Kings or something, where like take your son, and Now there's all these different explanations and all these different apologetics for it. Fine, whatever. But the point is, I'd never heard of those things when I was in when I took Bible study in the mornings before school. Never. So yeah. And what was the second thing? There's 2 things that you noted. What was the other thing? I'm asking you like you read my mind.
Well, yeah, the questions upon questions, and raise more questions and more stuff didn't make sense. I don't know if there was anything else in there that I said.
Nah, yeah, like my show, it's not important.
It's
all
not.
Right. Jephthah's daughter. Yeah. Like I said, I didn't know that stuff was in there. Yeah. Okay, let's move to the next one.
Can you name the last 3 academic books you read by theists on the subject? How long ago did you read them? Or is most of your understanding of apologetics and atheism from non-scholarly internet sources, pop-level books, and, let's face it, YouTube videos? And be honest with yourself about this. Anyone can Google up a list of books and paste them in the comments section. But I want to know, are you getting the best from the other side?
I don't think I've ever read a theist book I'm aware of.
No, I mean,
Have you read
genuinely with that
Swinburne
one.
What?
Latinga and people like that?
Well, okay, so
Yeah.
here's the thing. I read excerpts, right? I read things like papers, and I read, I love Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So, I mean, I don't read their whole books. I'll go in and I'll read some excerpts of chapter here and there. Like I've read Plantinga's Theodicies and, you know, his explanation for the logical problem of evil and things of that nature. But I don't really read apologetic books. Why? Because I'm not interested in apologetics. I only read stuff that I'm interested in. Now, I do have one book here that I started reading and I need to finish it, called The Story of the Cosmos by Daniel Ray, who you know, I got to meet in Texas. Real nice guy. But it tries to relate, you know, the origin of the universe to God and things of that nature. Oh, you know what? I take that back. I have read theist books. I read a lot of the RTB books they've sent me. I've read like Dinosaur Blood and the Age of the Earth by Fuzz Rana. I've read Jeff Swearing's book on the multiverse. And so, but that doesn't really convince me that there's a God, because like Jeff Swearing's book on the multiverse, yeah, the most of the book is talking about what the multiverse is. And then at the very end, conclusion, ergo God. You know, this is the same with a lot of the RT books. I just don't get to the conclusion, right? I just like, well, I don't see that part. But if you're already a believer, then it's like, oh, you know, God made this and that and evolution and all this other stuff. But as far as an apologetic book that I've read, I'm just not interested.
Yeah, no,
Answer
I'm the
the
same.
question.
I haven't read any apologetic book. I have read a few theistic books. I mean, when I was trying to find my religion after leaving Christianity, I was reading up on all the sort of different sorts of religion and what they were about and the various beliefs and all that sort of thing. So I did read back then. But the thing is, I think by the time you get to the point where you know you're convinced that God does not exist, you're not going to spend the money 30-40 quid on a philosopher's book of something that you just don't believe in. And you know at the end of the day it's not going to convince you, because if it would, someone would have presented that argument to you or the arguments in the book, and they would have convinced you, and then you may have bought that book for a bit of confirmation bias. So I almost see once you've reached that point, you're not going to bother reading that sort of thing.
Yeah,
And
no, I
don't
think
see how
exactly
it would-
right. I think you're exactly right. Oh, by the way, though, I remember there was 2 things that I had. What you just said reminded me what the second one was.
Oh, excellent.
Yes. Oh, wait, I forgot it again. No, I'm just kidding. No. What I was going to say was that you made a great point. You said you became an agnostic, then an atheist, and I see a lot of atheist activists don't allowing for that agnostic middle ground. They're like, oh, agnosticism is not a middle ground. Well, yeah, it is, and they're wrong. Period. That's a factually incorrect statement. Anybody who knows philosophy can go look that up. I'm tired of playing that game with them. They're just practically wrong. But I think it's a bad way of going about trying to promote atheism, because what they're doing is they're saying, hey, look, you're either an atheist or you're not an atheist. Okay, but they're saying if you're not a theist, you must be an atheist, and that is a false dichotomy. They're disallowing for that middle ground of agnosticism where you don't have a position either way, which a lot of people would be more likely to accept rather than they go full atheist. But at that point, they're not non-believer. If their goal is to just deconvert theists to non-belief, why take that option away from them? Because if they want to call themselves agnostic, because that's what they would be philosophically speaking, why disallow that? Right? I think it's counterproductive, because they're so entrenched in having this political motivation for demographic purposes and voting purposes, supposedly, to have atheism, which I don't think makes a bit of difference whether you're people, because now they have the nuns, right? That's all they give shit about. If they're a nun, they're a non-believer. That's what it should be. That should be the umbrella. Atheism, I'm sorry, is a piss poor umbrella when you're trying to subsume people like theological cognitivists and agnostics and apatheists, because a lot of them don't want to be subsumed into atheism because they're not atheist. And I think that is kind of having a backlash for these atheist activists now that they've come out and people have explained to them, hey, what you guys were saying for all these years is wrong. because you had people like myself and Ozzy and Malpass and Grandma P and Paul Draper and all these other people. You guys, Joe, your blog is spectacular. All of us have loved philosophy, and of course Dave. We've explained to people these things that they have been promoting bullshit for a very long time, and I think there's a lot of backlash for that because a lot of people have looked at they've looked objectively at it and go, well, fuck, Steve's right.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of them are in a bit of a sunk cost, aren't they? And they're
Yes.
taking their arguments to extreme stupidity.
Rocks
and
are
making
atheists.
Statements like rocks are atheists.
That's a good way, dude. I love the way you put that as a sunk cost fallacy. That nails it. You're right. They're so entrenched that they can't get out of that. That they're willing to go to these extremes in order to maintain their position. And I see a lot of atheist activists, their backs against the wall like that, because none of them have actually addressed my WASP argument. None of them have addressed my Gumballs and God on my blog in the video description. None of them have. And I don't expect them to. Although, like Fuzz Rana, the one I do a show with, Agree to Argue, he read my Gumballs and God. He liked, I've never had it explained like this before. That actually was really good. But I can't get I can't get an atheist activist to read that and go, well, okay, here's the problems with it, because there is no problem with it that I've seen. And I've had people like Landon Kurt Null review it and say, hey, there's nothing wrong with the logic here. And so when you have an atheist activist going, well, Steve's wrong, okay, great. What is the problem with the reasoning or the logic? Because they know there isn't, because they've been told by experts there isn't. So they won't even touch it. Has Matt Dillahunty or Aaron Ra, has either one of them ever addressed my arguments? No. What they've said is, oh, somebody else has, and here's their video. That video's nonsense. I'm sorry, that's not a refutation of my. Can I call it my work? my work. Yeah. I'm so pretentious nowadays. Now my blog. My life's work.
Well, they then go into that sort of dogmatic thing of just asserting that they're right and that you're wrong and they're logical and rational and you're not. But they can't support why they're the logical and rational one. They can't support why they're right. They just have to assert they are over and over. And you're like, this is like talking to a young Earth creationist. You don't even realize that that's what you sound like. Or maybe you do, but you're just so entrenched in this argument that you can't come out of it. I'd have so much more respect for them if they turned around and went, you know what? I have seen the error in my logic. I was arguing for ideological reasons. The reason I wanted the non-theists to be included as atheists was because we're the American atheists. So we wanted to be inclusive to all non-theists as that. Okay, but why don't you focus on non-theists? At the end
Atheists
of the day,
International does. I talked to John and that other guy from Atheists International the other day, and I think his name was John. He's a lot more receptive to that. The same thing. He's like, look, I have no problem with people calling themselves agnostic. They're a non-believer. That's all I give a shit about. We're called Atheists International, but we only care about if people are have God belief or they don't. But if you are agnostic, that we're not going to call you an atheist. We're not going to subsume you into that group. That's fine. I got no problem with that. He actually understands there's a philosophical explanation of these terms like agnosticism. And the other guy, though, he's like, no. If you don't believe, you're an atheist. I'm like, that's prescriptive nonsense. That's just bullshit. But as you guys can see, there is such ingrained indoctrinating platitude, or no, what's the word? Indoctrinating teachings, praxis, I guess, of these people putting out there and saying this is the only way it is. And I think that is a very disingenuous way of doing it. And I think it alienates more people because a lot of people don't want to be associated with that. That's what happened to me. I didn't want to be associated with those people. Why? Because I realized they were philosophically naive. They were irrational. They were illogical. I mean, I had Aaron Ra basically tell me like not B, not P was a double negative. I'm like, oh God. No, it's not. It's like dealing with the creationists at that point. Like, why are there still monkeys if we evolved from monkeys? That's the level it is. When you see somebody that practically wrong and you go, I don't want to be in that group. I just don't. And that's where I was, and now I've been excommunicated from the atheist communities because of that.
I'm an atheist, and I don't want to be associated with them.
Because you know that they do that. They're like that. Oh man.
And because we don't agree with everything they say, we're theists, apparently.
Yeah. Look, we're all on the Braxton side now, right? Yeah. Hardcore Christians, I guess. We're all Christian apologists because, we like things like logic and reason. All right, moving on here.
Let's finish with a pretty common one. If you found out today, to your satisfaction, that Christianity were true, would you accept God's authority, repent of your sins, trust Jesus as your king?
All right. By the way, I told you guys that we're just going to be 90 minutes. We're almost like right on target. 20. So 10 more minutes, and we're going to wrap this up because I want to get it under 90 minutes so Braxton can review it. And we're at the last question. And my answer to this question is pretty easy. Yeah. Look, I mean, if this is the case, if this is reality, such that Jesus is the Son of God or God Himself, yeah, I'm going to do whatever He says. Doesn't mean I have to agree with Him, because I can't force myself to agree with somebody regardless of who they are, whether they're an omnipotent being or God or not. If I have an ethical problem with that, I can't force myself to believe something that they say is wrong. All right? So what they would have to do is explain to me, Steve, this is why, gay marriage is wrong. This is why, being transgender is wrong. And I would have to reach that position on my own accord. My brain has to tell me, yeah, they're right. But I don't see that happening, obviously. But the point is, I have a hard time asking forgiveness merely because I have a different ethical point of view than the deity that hasn't convinced me that their point of view is correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those ones where, I mean, if I would believe, if they could prove to me that God existed, then I would obviously believe and I would accept the stories. But I would still have questions as well. I'd want to know why these things were wrong, why these things were right, why we should do this, why we shouldn't do that. What's all these different things that seem contradictions within the Bible, etc. And if all of that could be explained to me and actually put in a way where it was like, actually, this bit was wrong in the Bible, that was someone writing it, it's a transcription error or whatever, and this is why this is and this is why that, and they gave me an adequate explanation, then do you know what, maybe I would even fall into worship. But at the end of the day, if we knew it was true and I knew I had to do certain things, otherwise I definitely would be burning in hell forever, then I would do my best to do those
exactly.
Because,
look, there's nothing more, there's no moral accomplishment, there's no martyrdom for saying, hey, I'm going to stand for the God and go to hell for eternity. I'm sorry, that's a piss poor form of martyrdom, because nobody's going to give a shit. Nobody's going to know or care. So yeah, I don't think anybody would, in their right mind, should do anything that stupid if God exists. However, God would know whether you're faking worship or not. If God just wants you to go through the motions, it's a pretty petty God. He's going to know whether I actually accept Him as a benevolent being or not. I mean, you would think so. But if the question is, would you worship Him? Yeah, go through the motions. Sure. Yeah, that's what He wants. But you can't force yourself to accept what's called a dystheistic type God or a mesotheist type God, of a malevolent God or a partly malevolent God, because I don't know what an omnibenevolent God would be. But my opinion of the God that a lot of these theists portray is not a morally good God in most cases. And so, yeah, I'm going to have ethical differences with that. And when they say, well, it's God, He's objective. Oh, okay, He hasn't convinced me of that yet, though. Let's say I convince He exists. Okay, God exists. I'm now a Christian. God is, Christ is the Son of God or God. But why? Why is, eating shellfish bad? Why is gay marriage bad? Why is abortion bad? I have to know the answers to these questions in order to change my position on them. It's not a matter of, oh, God exists, Christ is the Son of God, ergo, I've changed my whole ethical framework. That makes no sense, because I could say, okay, yeah, don't do these things, but at the same time, I don't have those beliefs that those things are bad, like, gay marriage. And I think that if God just cares what the emotions are and not about our actual beliefs, what the hell kind of God is that?
It's not a good God. Yeah.
It's petty.
My answer is similar to that. It's, I believe, but unless he could show me that he was good and why my conception of good is wrong, I'm not sure I could worship him.
Yeah. Agreed.
I agree. But again, well, be going through the motions. I mean, again, it would just be like, sure, if you just want to like, pray and you just want to like kneel, if that's what God's looking for, I would definitely do that if he existed. Yeah, if that's what he wanted me to do. But the point is, as a dostastic involuntarist, which means I don't really, I can't force myself to believe something. Now, I think we do have we have compatibilism, right? We don't have free will, but we have decision-making abilities. And I think that some cases, yes, we do choose our beliefs, right? We evaluate things. But a lot of beliefs are just things that our brain tells us we're convinced of. And I'm sorry, I am convinced that the God that a lot of theists posit is not an ethical being in many cases. And I can't just on the fly change that, even if I knew that he existed. So I think this question is very simply put, or the answer to this question is very simply put, sure, I would believe it, obviously, because it is reality if that was the case. I would worship that particular God. But Braxton has to understand I cannot change my ethical framework merely because I know God exists now. I can say, okay, according to God who knows all things, this is unethical. But why? Tell me, God, why? And he would have to explain it to me. I'm sorry. It sounds odd because a lot of theists would go like, well, that's just arrogant. You're questioning God. Yeah, I'm questioning God. I'm not questioning him as in, oh, you're a deity and I question your power. I'm questioning God as, can you explain to me how I'm wrong on this like I would anybody else?
And if God is perfectly good and perfectly wise, it would want to. And it would understand why
he would find a way to do
things.
it too. Yeah, he'd find a way to do it. Well, anyways, guys, we're coming up to the 90-minute mark. Perfect. This was perfect timing. Dave said it was going to 3 hours. I told you it wasn't. Or was it Joe? One of you guys told me.
That.
Joe said it.
I said it was. I bet it would take twice as long.
Yeah. No, I got these things planned out. But anyways, show your stuff out,
More
guys.
skilled than we are.
I've done this a while. But show you guys your stuff out because your blogs are amazing. I got to admit, out of all the blogs I read, your guys' blogs are so spot on. And plus, you have the Intrigued Feline do a very brilliant objective breakdown of the Non Sequitur show and just spot on analysis. So I think if anybody really wants to read philosophy and to see what we've talked about today, your blog is a place to do it. My blog too, but your blog. but
That's why we push your blog, because we feel the same about you.
I got to put your blog in the video description. I totally forgot. My bad. I will do that after the video. But you can put it out. Do you have mods in the live chat to do that? I can give you. Or just tell people. Well, the link to your blog.
Oh yeah, so www.answers-in-reason.com, or in fact it should go, if you just type in answersinreason.com, it should forward you anyway, because I bought both domains, but I just like having the hyphens in there, it makes it clearer. So if anyone wants to come and have a read, I will say probably stay away from the really, really old stuff. I mean, that was when I was coming out of my keyboard warrior phase, and it's probably a little bit more crap.
But that's fine. That's good though, because it shows a progression, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you're a hell of a lot more physically. Are you more physically? Are you more philosophically minded now than you were back then? By far.
Oh yeah, by a long way, I'd say so. I mean, a lot of my earlier articles were more science based. Some of them were about like vaccinations and evolution and all that sort of thing. And then we had very common theistic fallacies. And I think over time, I've spent more and more time looking into various philosophical topics, having conversations with people online, especially people like Dave and yourself, and adjusting my thoughts, looking at this article, that article, and further the conversation, then go, right, I've formed an opinion on this, right, I'm gonna jot it all down. And I've also started looking inwards at what is essentially supposedly our tribe. And I've got a series of articles about bad atheist arguments and atheism as an ideology and pitfalls of new atheism and things like that, because I think actually there's far too much argumentation online. There's far too much fighting. And a lot of that is actually not because the theists can't support their claims. It's because we all seem to act a bit like idiots and don't take the time to understand the other people and their positions and question them properly and try and elicit the responses we'd like from them. And we make a lot of false statements, like we've discussed with things like belief being a dirty word. Faith is another dirty word, when faith essentially just means trust. And I know that contextually it can have that sort of sourness to it, but all those different things in there, I think that realistically, if we look at this and we sit down and we become skeptics towards ourselves rather than just being denialists to everyone else, we can form better arguments, we can have better conversations, we can take the time to understand and question and learn something new. We may not convince the other person may not convince us, but you can have a good conversation with someone online of a different ontological position than you, rather than just getting an argument and going, prove it, prove your claim. Oh, you're an idiot.
Yeah, you nailed it. Dave, you want to add anything to that? Or are you gonna just leave?
Where'd he go?
Dave, he's like, mic drop. I'm out.
I'm sure he'll be back in. I'm sure that wasn't intentional.
There he is.
There you go.
Sorry, I dropped out. My bloody internet, it does it all the time. No, I have nothing to add. That's why he does most of the talking on the live streams, and I just come in with the philosophy.
That was a brilliant close. I'll just do my quick close and then show my stuff. To top
I love that I'm Dave now, and Dave is Joe on the stream as well.
It's all messed up. It's okay. I don't have a producer for the show.
Dave.
Yeah, so I'm doing it all myself. But
it's quite funny as well, because Braxton knows us as the guy on the left and the guy on the right, so we're now that person.
That's going to confuse them. All right, so a couple things. One, I do love the fact you use the word denialism. It's all I see a lot of times. Denial, but they don't really, engage, right? It's anybody can say I don't believe you. But I hope that these types of engagements, Braxton wanted some answers to these questions. He did so as an honest interlocutor. I provided them as a honest person from my point of view as an agnostic, and let's see what he thinks. But I think, like you said, a lot of people on these forums, Twitter and Facebook especially, they go in and they don't want to have a dialectic. They don't want to have a conversation. They want to sit back and go, oh, I don't believe you. Oh, demonstrate your God, prove your God. Those people I don't have anything to do with. They're not at the big boys table, right? They're just what are you going to have a conversation with them? So stop doing that. Stop doing that, people. If you're one of those people out there that want to do the base level nonsense, go play somewhere else, because it's not going to get you anywhere. It doesn't do anything to anybody. It doesn't convince anybody any different. It doesn't change any minds. And we do these things because we want to change minds, sure, but we also want to have the dialogue. And so I'm going to be probably doing these things more often if I can find videos like Braxton's or something like that to talk about. But I want to find people that want to have honest questions, and I think these were, and I think we answered them pretty well, actually. I think that we did a pretty good job. But with that, guys, please like, subscribe, share these videos, become a Patreon, become a member of the channel. Like I said, I'll be doing more stuff like this. I still got a lot of other stuff planned in the works, but it's been hell this year. It's been hell. It really has. Yeah. It really has. But I appreciate all my subscribers, and I appreciate all the people that have become Patreons and members of the channel. And my words can't express how much it's been helping me a lot. With that, I'll leave you with some final words. My final catchphrase for this video should be: any idiot can say, "I don't believe you."
Yeah.
Don't be an idiot.
Have you got any evidence to support that statement, Steve?
Good night.